Okay.
Welcome back to New to Medical Device Sales. I am your host, Jacob McLaughlin, and today I am so blessed and so excited to have our guest today. This guest is somebody who was a part of the course, who absolutely crushed it, took advantage of every part of the resources that we had, but also just put in the work. She I just have grown to just enjoy her so much, become a friend because she is just an amazing human being, how she carries herself. But she's also someone who comes from the pharma world. So I'm excited to bring you Jen Lytle, who has 10 years experience in the pharmaceutical world as a mother of two from Jackson, Tennessee. So she has a great accent and she's just a fun person to be around. So Jen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. I'm excited. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Again, it's funny how the timing works, especially how I just made that podcast about talking about pharmaceutical reps and kind of the difference between pharma and med device. And then you
Yeah.
get hired in medical device sales. You're from the pharma world. You're in the course, and we just get to tie it all together.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was a great episode. I know like there's probably a lot of question, people reaching out to you and stuff about the differences
Yep.
and which, really like which one really is a better fit for them. So I think that was a great episode.
Yeah, and it's gonna be fun today because you'll be actually able to speak to it since you've lived it, especially for 10 years, and now you're making that switch. But before we jump into that, can you just give
Yeah.
us a little bit of background about who you are, how you got into pharmaceuticals and a little bit of that information?
Yeah. So, I in college, I was always like very interested in sciences and things like that. Neither one of my parents, completed college. So really, like, I don't know, I didn't have, I guess, the aspiration at the time and really the belief that, like, oh yeah, like the medical field and med school is where I want to be. So, I got my bachelor's just in business. And got an internship right out of college, did that for about a year, and just the opportunity presented itself. A lot of times in pharma you have to start out with like a contract role, and that's what this position was. So took that. I was really fortunate, had a couple positions there with that contract, and was able to be hired in permanently, and I've been at my company now over 4 years. So I've had a good run there in the pharmaceutical world. And like I said, it's always that something that was interesting to me. I didn't feel like medical school was the right fit. There's some, background to that, but that was where my interest really lied. I
Yeah.
liked the clinical side of things.
Yeah. And no, and
Yeah.
that makes it, I hear that all the time, right? Well, hey, let's get into the sciences. What are the other options? And we've had podcasts
Yeah.
about this. You guys, if you haven't heard them, you can go back. Many people consider med school and then end up not going. We actually have had people go into med school and actually drop out and then join our course and go
Yeah.
into it just because there's a lot of differences and it's a different fit for every single person. But when you did pharma, what was like, what drew you to pharma?
Well, I think, like I said, kind of the clinical aspect of it.
Yeah.
I like the selling, and in my mind, like that's what I thought, right? Sales, sales, sales. My personality, I think that was just a really good fit there. I like to talk to different people. I like to hear and understand different perspectives. So I think that's really kind of what, and then it being in like, a clinical space.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great fit.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so when you did pharma, what made you start thinking, okay, how'd you even hear about med device sales? What made you start thinking that next level or what the next industry?
Yeah. So I was really fortunate. I had really fantastic partners that I worked with, like, they're called your counterparts in the pharmaceutical world early on. And they were tenured people. They were just very great about like sharing their wisdom, their experiences, things like that. And the pharmaceutical industry is very volatile. It
Yeah.
changes, layoffs happen. It's always kind of that awareness of like keeping your options open and being prepared for that, because in that world it's almost, that's like the inevitable,
Yep.
and so having counterparts that spoke into me And, we're like, this is a great space to be in the pharmaceutical world. Medical device is a great industry, understanding the differences there between distributorship, so 1099 and W-2 roles and all of that. And I had a partner that, I think deep down he really had wanted to go that route, but he had a family and the only really opportunities at the time were 1099 roles. It just wasn't a fit. But
Yep.
I had some experience there with people kind of coaching me of, if you really, it's more of when you get laid off. When you get laid off, right? There's this whole other industry that you need to be looking at. Like, don't just set your sights on pharma.
Yep. Yeah, no, and,
Yeah.
and that's a good point to say because to your point, like we see it all over, and especially right now in the term of the world that we're seeing the recession, right? One of
Yep.
the top medical device companies that I'm aware of just did a massive layoff. If you guys haven't been in that world, you will know that as you're reaching out to people.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, it's a lot of inevitable. But like we've talked about on the recent podcast, is pharma's more likely to, like you said, it's not if, it's when you get laid off
Yeah.
because of just how it's ran as a business and some of the things with it compared to med device. Like I know lifers at companies that were with companies for 20, 30 years. And
Yes.
or they just transferred. They never got fired, but they just made the jump to go leverage it, make more money, maybe slow down, whatever that was. And so
Yeah.
that's a great point that you make. And so when you did it, because for you, I remember when we got on our call, when you're looking at joining the course and everything, it was you're not somebody who, hey, I'm losing my job and I can't do this.
Right.
It's you're doing well. You actually were crushing it.
Yep.
But you're like, hey, I feel like there's another step for me. And I'm at that point in my career where I want to actually go and take that step and maybe make the jump outside of the industry. Because again, we're not going to disclose all the stuff, but what gets me so excited is when we talk and it's like we talk about your income and what you're making in pharma after being in 10 years. And it's like what the
Yep.
opportunity though was in med device, and you're going to come in and make more in your med device first year than it was there. And again, that's not saying that you can't make it in pharma because there are people, but I just wanted to state that because I put it on that last podcast. I used to have a
Yep.
guy who was in for 10, 15 years trying to be like, I'm doing this well. And it's like, yeah, but I was doing that well in my first year of med device.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and see, like, I feel like in the pharmaceutical world, like I said, so for the most part, and this is just my experience, like
Yep.
I've personally lived this, I know many people that have to start this way. To even get in, you're going to start in a contract role. So you're looking at a base somewhere between probably 45 and 55 to 60. Okay. You're more than likely going to get a fleet car and you're going to get a commission that's paid quarterly, roughly 20 grand. Okay. On top of your base. So you're all in looking at 65, 75,000. Okay. That's great. Where I live in Tennessee, that's a fantastic income. But a lot of times contracts, they're like that across the board. So it doesn't matter if you live in New York State, doesn't matter if you live in California, it is what it is,
Yep.
right? So consider that number one. You're probably going to start contract unless you're lucky. But even if you get in as a permanent role, your salary is still not going to be 90,000. You're going to start, they might start you at 65 if you're
Yep.
looking at like a AZ or, Eli Lilly, Merck, something like that. I work for a small pharmaceutical company. So my base generally is lower than these bigger companies can pay, but there's a trade-off in that we're a smaller company, they don't have as many reps. I'm the only rep in my territory. Instead of being one of 4 or 5, I'm one of one. And so there's a little bit of security there that comes with that. I just tell people who leave, maybe like have left my company that I've worked with, or leave a contract to go to a bigger company, layoffs will happen.
Yeah.
Like, so while the salary's good and while it's there, like you need to be putting money back. You need to have 6 months of your bills stored. That's just part of the industry.
Yep.
Right. And you can make great money. But yeah, your incremental pay increase year over year on your base is very minimal. So your potential really is in your commission payoff. And some
Yep.
of those are capped
Yep.
and some are not. So you just got to understand all that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. The reason I'm just asking the detailed, and thank you for going into all that detail and actually saying specific numbers because this helps listeners is like, especially right now, all the graduates of college right now, all the seniors are
Yeah.
graduating. And the number one thing is, hey, I'm looking at pharma and med device. But like
Yep.
I stated in the last podcast, is you need to have a real discern, like you need to know where you're going
Yep.
because you can't tell a med device person you're thinking pharma because if you catch the right person, like when I hear that, I'm like, hey guys, you should probably just decide what you want. But I can sit here and tell you, I've heard like I've been with reps while I was in the area when somebody did that and they just ripped them, right? And then
Yeah.
they'll hang up the phone and they'll be like, these people, because farmers just it's got this stigma in med device again. It's not what I say, but that's what people think, and you faced it going through your journey.
Yeah.
And so that's what I just want people to really know. So hopefully what you just said right there was super helpful to any listeners that are graduating is
Yeah.
that is an opportunity. But the one thing I just want to say is this is somebody had to tell me, and it was hard for me to hear, but it's easy for me to hear. You think $75,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And like when, especially when you're 23, 24, 25, you're like, I'm rich and I'll buy a Ferrari, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what goes to the head. But then you actually go live life and then you're like, oh, 75 grand, but I get taxed on that 75
Yes.
grand. Oh, and then I need to pay my rent and oh, groceries and then gas. And then, oh, my car just broke down and oh, I want to go do something instead of just sit at my house. You know what I mean? You do this
Absolutely.
and you still have to budget. Like that's the biggest thing. You guys will always have to budget. But that was my big thing when I started doing personal training. I would talk to these people and I was like, hey, I always was going to be a trainer and do this stuff, but I was like, hey, if I made $80,000, like I'm a simple small town boy. Like it
Yeah.
was always going to work for me on Iowa. Like I can go back and it's just fun when I was just back home last week and it's just you see it and I'm like, yeah, this could work. But like if you're going to be in Arizona where the average rent right now is between $1,500 and $2,500, or there's half your paycheck after taxes.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so I just wanted to state that to you guys because what Jen just went into, and I'll let her kind of go into a little more, but it's like you can see where you can kind of cap out and you as a career as you're trying to grow, hey, 100K sounds like a lot, 120 sounds like a lot, but again, once you get welcome to taxes and the rest of the world, and if you have a family, like I'm just feeding myself right now, and I'm like, good
Yeah.
Lord, and you have three others, your husband and your kids, and it's like all that. So it's just I just wanted to state that for everybody who is either a farmer rep, because I just had three farmer reps actually reach out to me today via LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So those people, but also like if you guys are considering that out of college, it's just again my advice personally is go med device first, and then you can always go pharma if it's too much. Then vice versa, because we're about to get into it, but you'll hear like Jen had a harder time, quote unquote, than maybe someone who didn't have that pharma experience because of there's the stigma that she's trying to overcome because she's not a normal pharma rep to the outside world, but like they're always going to put her in this box because of that.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that was even like when I finally was able to talk to a recruiter in the process, it's like, yeah, I mean, I saw your resume come through and basically it's like got tossed in the trash. Like I see the experience and see, honestly, Jacob, until the first time we talked on the phone, right? I mean, you made the comment, you were like, I think you're gonna have it's going to be a little bit more difficult journey. And I'm like, why? I have 10 years in pharmaceutical. And you're like, that's not a good thing. Like, like in this industry, like that's the nail in the coffin. Like,
Yeah.
so that's actually like, I thought it was going to be a benefit, right? It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and to that point, like I remember this phone call. I was walking around talking to you, and I remember us talking. But like to that point is like when I was trying to break in, you'll see recruiters. They literally will put in the job posting, "Farmer reps do not
Yeah.
apply."
Yeah.
No need to reply or no need to apply. That's literally the stigma. Is if you've been in, like everyone always told me, if you're gonna go pharma, get in and get out within 2 years, because you can always just say you were naive, you didn't know, and then all that. That's literally what they coach you to say if
Yeah.
you end up going to pharma compared to med device just looks at it, and we've talked about it, is they don't value it. They don't think you're doing the work, even though like someone like you who's a performing rep, you were, and that's why we were able to get you to get where you were going. But
Yeah.
that's the conversation is you are overcoming, and like we've talked about this on recruiters. Love them to death. I know some very good ones, so that's why we work with only really good ones. But
Yeah.
majority of them, like I can sit here and tell you from experience, from other friends' experience, half the time they don't even know the job description. They don't know how much the pay is. They don't know the actual territory. And that's the
Yeah.
person you're relying on to get you a job. Right.
Yep.
And that's not good enough. And especially then you put pharma in there. That's where we helped you. And I knew we were going to be able to help you is because I already knew the objections coming your way.
Yeah.
It just, how are we going to handle them so you can be like, brush it off the shoulder. That's not a big deal. Let me show you why I've been crushing it and why I would be awesome in this industry.
Right. Right. And I mean, I think more than anything from the beginning, like your advice of like network, 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 network. And like started doing that right out of the gate, and like I got a lot more traction than I thought that I would. But I was very intentional about when I was reaching out to people and adding them to connect on LinkedIn. I would look at their profile, and like if they came from the pharmaceutical, if they had any pharmaceutical background, in that message when I send the connection, like,
Yep.
hey, I'm trying to break in. I noticed you had, 8 years at GSK or wherever. And coming from the pharmaceutical industry, like I would love your insight, the differences in industry and how you were able to cross over.
And I bet your response rate was awesome,
It
right?
was awesome.
Yeah, and
It
so
was
they would
awesome.
come because we talk about this all the time. Everybody always calls me, and I wish I could say something new to you guys, but it's networking. Like
It's
there's no other answer, and everyone's like, I need to know. But this is now the new sell for me, and like I talk about it, everyone just networks wrong. Everybody
hmm
calls and, "Hey, I got 30 messages this morning. Hey, looking for a job, you know of any?" "Yep, I do, but I'm
I
not giving it to
do.
you because I don't
Yeah,
know who you are. You
exactly.
weirdos. Like, you could be a serial killer, and, like, I'm not gonna give that my name," right? The reason I'm saying that is what you did is what I tell everybody. It's just the everyone asks, "What's the difference between people getting hired?" It's what you just said. It's the little effort you took, that extra 30 seconds to look on it, see if you had it, and then you went and put in the message, and this is the number one thing, it's the common ground. It's no different than every single time I'm in an OR and I say, "Doc, where you from?" And the moment they say they're from the Midwest, I know I have them. I'm like, "Oh, I'm from Iowa." And they're like, "Oh, you are?" And I'm like, "Oh, you hate the cold too?" Because we're in Scottsdale. And they're like, "Oh," and bam,
Yep.
right into it. Or, "Hey, you come from a farm?" Bam. Or, "Oh, the weather is actually nice here." But it doesn't matter. But you find that common ground, and now you can just go from there. And so
Right.
that's what you just did in that message. And that's why I already knew you had a high retention and a high response rate, because they're always right away, they're being like, she took the time to look who she's talking to. She
Yep.
actually knows that we have a similar background. And oh, I used to be in her shoes. I want to help. Because she asked
Yeah.
in a professional manner. It wasn't saying, hey, because like, let me just put this for everyone listening. If Jen would have been like, hey, I saw you're from Pharma, me too, trying to get a job. Do you know of any? She would have got no results. But that's
No.
99% of the messages I receive from you
Yeah.
guys listening to this podcast and YouTubes or whatever. It's the bare minimal effort. And just because you sent a message, like I joke around all the time, I can type it out and have my dog who's sleeping on my bed right now press enter. That's
Yep.
not hard. Like, anybody can just copy paste and press enter. It's
Yep.
what are you doing to stand out in that process?
Well, and like, so, like, I'm just gonna say it because, like, I feel like you would appreciate me just like throwing this out there. Like, this is the same. This is the same way that you are going to be in the job. Like, if you don't take the time to Google somebody, look up their practice, look up what they do the first time you meet them, if you're just trying to just shove yourself down their throat, like, the receptions, they're not gonna have it. Like, it's glazed over, they're walking off like you just blew it. Like, same thing,
Yep.
same thing.
Yep, 100%. We talk about it. If you guys ever decide to join the course, you will have a lot of dating analogies
Yep.
that will make you understand it. Because I always bring it back to dating. I always bring it back to, you're out on a first date, you're out of it. And we don't think about it that way. But when you put it into those terms, it's like, oh, it makes perfect sense, right? For
Yep.
example, I'll put one that's a little vulgar on here, but like most of you guys, let me just say this. When you all send me a message of like, hey, I'm looking for a job, do you know of any? Can you send it to me? That's the equivalent of me reaching out to random women on LinkedIn, Instagram, saying, I'm single. Do you want to hook up?
Yeah.
Probably not going to go over the greatest. Probably going to get a
No.
couple blocks and maybe even get a police report about me if I did that, right? That's where
Right.
it's the joking of, that's what you guys are doing the equivalent of. And then you're like, I reached out to 100 people and nobody sent me a message back. Like, what the heck, right? That's what goes on. And so, again, what Jen's saying is it's just putting the effort. But we preach about this, and it's why we have so much success. It's why Jen was able to break in under 3 months and being in the course. It's we teach you guys how to do the job to get the job.
Yeah.
And she already knew how to do it, but then what we had to do is just how to tweak it a little bit with her background
Yeah.
because there's going to be a little tougher things that she was going to face. And so, can we talk about just a little bit of what was the interview process like for you going through pharma? Because I know, but let's share a little bit with these guys of kind of the ups and downs that you went with and kind of the coaching we did with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had two different experiences where I got to like the very final interview stage. Um, and so round one, let's just say round one, company one, right? Um, that process was a lot more, I don't know. I kind of even got the vibe from the beginning that they really weren't interested. But the thing was, I had done so much networking that their reps were throwing my name out. I even had a surgeon who, I was calling on now, who called that manager. He's like, she's a go getter. Like, she's called on me for months. She's a great resource. So he threw my name out. Even from the beginning, I could tell there was doubt and hesitation, even though like I addressed it, and they're like, yeah, that doesn't matter to me. It just, all that matters is you can do the job. When it comes down to it, and I impress this person and I impress this person and this person, and I show up with a business plan and I do all the things, right? And your only feedback for me is, yeah, we just went with somebody who had more experience. That to me was like, from the beginning, it was the pharmaceutical background. It was the fact that I had not been in the device industry. There was no actual like tangible feedback
Yep.
because it was all positive, like across the board.
Yep. And I
Yeah.
just want to state, like, I remember I knew the process as we were going through because we were very active in that, and even with that end one that I remember having the call with you because it was just like you put so much effort into it. But again, giving you the coaching of like, hey, you did nothing wrong. This is where
Yeah.
we again help because Jen's like, oh my gosh, did I do this? Did I do it? And I said, no, you did nothing wrong. The unfortunate part is they never considered you in the real, like a lot, actually real first place because if they did,
Yep.
they wouldn't be able to do that because. And the reason I can just sit here and tell you guys this is never a cocky thing. It's just whenever they say we went with somebody with more experience, I can tell you it's a bunch of crap because you're looking at the guy who was a personal trainer who beat out the guys
Yep.
with 10 years experience to get both jobs that I have now. So I know that if you wow them enough and you do the stuff that they can't, but when they can't give you feedback, right?
Yep.
When you called, and this was the most interesting, is I had you call that person back, a
Yeah.
couple people back, right? And Jen did. It was no, it's fine, but then there was this, and then this, and then this, but it was all positive, but it was the stories never added up, which
Right.
then shows you again bringing it back to dating, right? I
Yep.
really like you, but they're kissing other girls. Like
Mhm.
there's it just the actions aren't matching the words, and so you just going through that process.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like I definitely felt like in that experience, it didn't matter. Like, pharmaceutical was on my resume. It was a done deal before it even got started. It was dead in the water. Um, the second, so my second experience, again, started out same way, networking. So how do I even get in touch with the hiring manager is because I had talked to a rep here. And he got me another rep's number, and then she got me the hiring manager's number. And so I'm the whole process, it's funny because you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. Like, you're talking to these people before you've even got any kind of notification that you're being considered. But it was an entirely different reception of me, because I was so forthcoming with like, hey, like, I know I come from the pharmaceutical background. I don't have medical device experience, but like, explain the role to me. This is my understanding. These are conversations that I've had with reps.
Yep.
Are we aligned, right? And this is what I'm currently doing, where I can see how it correlates to this position. So tell me if I'm off here, if I'm missing something.
Yep.
Um, and interestingly enough, by the time I had talked to the hiring manager, And I'm going, okay, so what are the next steps in the process? He goes, well, you've really kind of already completed them. And the fact that you have to talk to this rep, like generally she's a part of the interview process. I like to pull in this area sales manager, and you've talked to Rob, so that's checked. And then I'm the final piece, really, right? So we did a formal interview process where it gets set up through HR. We have Zoom calls. I don't know how many other candidates are going through that process, but I do know I'm not the only one.
Yep.
And I actually, at the end of the process, he can't offer me the job on the call. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean I didn't ask, right?
Yep.
And through that process, like, okay, hey, when I'm talking to the rep, hey, we had a great conversation. What about me? What do you think makes me, a good fit for this role? She shares to say, okay, now would you share that with
Bam.
hiring manager? Yep. Do the same thing with the other manager. Would you hire me? I know you're not the hiring manager, but you're over this team. Like,
Yep.
would you hire me? Okay, share that. And I was actually able to, when I asked, the hiring manager's like, I can just say, like, you're in a really, really good spot, right? And I follow
Yep.
up with, okay, when can we expect to hear? And I
Yep.
put a deadline on that. So if I don't hear by this time, Friday at noon, is it fair to reach out?
Yep.
And I'm closing that. And, come to find out, I had actually beat an internal candidate. So that was like somebody that I was up against. And so that felt amazing. And, I know you've mentioned it on the podcast too, with pharmaceutical reps, there's always somebody that they make that connection with that's willing to take a shot on them because they kind of came from that same background.
Yep.
Um, and I'm like, when I got that job offer, it was like I conquered the world, because like none of them had been in the pharmaceutical world,
Yep.
and so eh, just to be on here and say, like, it's definitely possible. Like, it's all just about how you present yourself and what you bring to the table. And like, they just have to be compelled enough by you and your confidence in your story to overlook the lack of med device or overlook pharmaceutical.
100%. And the thing I want to just touch on is because you stated two different opportunity one, opportunity two, but they were totally different in the vibes they gave off the field and how they were excited. And this is the thing I talk to you guys about all the time. We teach it in our course and we talk about it to our students is, you know, they should be excited to be about you, right? For example, it always comes back to dating. If you're going out on dates and someone's a drag to be around and they feel like it's a chore to be with you don't want to be
Yep.
with that person. They're not showing the effort that they actually like you. But if it's the person who's going out of their way, excited, texting you back, it's the same thing with my people like you. The managers being proactive, they're telling you stuff. They're trying to be like, "Hey, here's this to know," because they want to put you through because you're showing the effort and they're giving you the opportunity compared to the other one. Like we said, you did everything right and you did it, but
Yeah.
it was never going to be an opportunity. And so the reason I'm saying that is for everyone listening, just because you guys are going through the opportunities and you're going through those interviews doesn't mean it's the right one. And just because there's that's one thing that we also help with inside that in the course is really being able to tell you guys, hey, is this a real opportunity or is this maybe watch this, make sure to network, but also being able to, even if it was an offer, is this one worth taking for you guys? Because there's a lot of people who will go and then when they don't have what we teach is how to try to go and get multiple offers. So then you leverage
Yep.
those. And then even if you're not getting the offer, we're going through interview processes. We're leveraging all this to make it work, and we teach you guys how to do that. But in the same respect, if you just have one, what happens is you become desperate. You're just trying to take whatever it is. Then they give it to you. Then they can pay you way less. Then you don't even know if it's a good fit. Like the amount of calls I get with people who do that because they decide not to do the course or they didn't know about us, and then they go do it because they think they want to save the money and they're trying to do it, but then they do it for 3 or 4 months. They got lied to in quotation marks or air marks as I'm on the videos because they told them one thing, but they didn't know. But the red flags were there from the beginning. If I was there sitting there, I could have saved you in 2 minutes and been like, nope, it's not worth it. But because
Yep.
you're ignorant or you didn't want to do it because of whatever reason, you don't know. Now you find out, and then instead of sticking it out like you should, you quit within 3 months, 5 months, 6 months. Now you're not liking it, and you see where this road goes. And now you if you get in and then you quit within 6 months, you're in even more trouble because that's a red flag. Because now, what are we doing here? This person can't even stick it out with 6 months, and it doesn't matter if you say, "Well, they told me something that was different," or that, or you go bad talk and be like, "Oh, it's not what I want." guess what? That hiring manager is just hearing how you're going to be on their team, and they're not going
Mm-hmm.
to want to have you. So that's the reason I say that. But I wanted to share like Jen's experiences with those two different companies. It was night and day.
Oh, night and day.
One who's like, yeah, we want to put in the effort to her, and the other one who's like, you're just there, and if we need you. And let me just make this clear. It was I knew from day one when got told like the hiring manager didn't even respond. They had set a meeting, and the
Yeah.
hiring manager didn't have enough like just being a good human being to send a message and saying, "Hey, I'm not going to be there. Can we reschedule?" Wasn't just going to ghost them. And so I'm always very happy to post that. Jen never said that. I was just coaching it. But I'm just coming on here and saying if this manager ever says it, I'm happy to take your call because I will not change my tone on it at all. As I just don't think it just comes down to being a human and being a decent human and actually respecting other people's. So if you're not going to take their call or if you're not going to meet with them, just tell them that. And,
Yeah.
and if you forgot, and like here's the other thing, we all forget. We all have those things. But guess what happens when I forget? My goodness, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But when you act like it doesn't matter at all, it just shows you everything you need. And again, this is where I tell you guys, it's the same people who tell me they're going to work so hard, they're going to do everything, and they're going to break it on their own. Great. Talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. And so I just wanted to state that for everyone who's going through that process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like literally to reiterate that, like Jacob, I never even told you this because I think it was like so embarrassing. It's like, oh my goodness. He would be like, what are you doing? Looking back on that experience, right? I had put myself on the line because I knew they were supposed to be in town and meet with me that day. I had told two of my surgeons, one of whom is the chief of surgery, that's a huge user of them, of their company and their product. I was like, hey, they're going to be in town today. If you need anything, like make sure you reach out to them because they're going to be here. So I had thrown my name out there like to them and saying they're going to be here. And then literally got ghosted. And the very first interview that I even had, Jacob, you're probably going to be like, shake your head. Um, it's a Zoom call, right? And I should have known then, but it's like the guy shows up in his car in a hoodie. And I'm going like, this is an interview, right? And like, so I'm like, I'm prepared. I've taken PTO. I'm dressed.
Say no more.
That's it. It's like you just get this vibe, and they never like emails, texts, phone calls. And then company two, anytime they missed a call or took a day to respond, I mean, it was, I'm so sorry, I apologize. I mean, just a completely different reception.
Yep.
And exactly to your point, it's just like dating. Like, don't be a doormat for somebody and
Yep.
just take something out of desperation.
Yep.
Like, value yourself and what you bring to the table, and have somebody so hungry and like want you so badly that they just have the respect to communicate.
100%. And that's what we talk about all the time. And the reason I say this, and again, this is all we just do in the coaching, is it took time for me to figure that out.
Yeah.
And not just even through the interview process, but also once you're in the industry, right? Like that's
Yeah.
what we get you guys prepped and it's all that. But yeah, you should want it. And like what I can sit here and tell you is like my people who are like the top ones, they have regional managers begging them, please don't take another offer. We're getting
Yeah.
HR is being a little slow, but they'll getting it to you as soon, right? They show that they want it. And so
Yeah.
they're always being proactive. So I wanted to just state that, and that's such a great point, Jen. Like again, always knowing your worth, knowing you are having something to offer. But the one thing I did just want to ask is because again, you were somebody who did the course, you excelled in it, got hired in under 3 months, you made the
Yeah.
jump from pharma to here. Can I ask what did you feel inside the course was one of the things that, or some of the things that helped you the best, that you felt you got benefits from us and the course that you might not have had if you didn't take the course?
I mean, I definitely think the breakdown of the interview process. Number one, the length of the process. It's not like that in a lot of other industries.
Yeah.
Even the pharmaceutical world, it's long, but it's not that long. I mean, it's maybe a month, like if that,
Yep.
from start to finish. I did not realize the value in the networking. In the pharmaceutical world, that's not really so much of a thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's just because like they just hire so many people left and right that no, it's more transactional. Where when you have people that can vouch for you and know your work ethic and integrity and the way you work, it makes a big difference. So I think that the breakdown of the interview process, the mock interviews. I wasn't able to get on office hours just because of, working a full-time job, but having those posted later,
Yeah, we record
going back
those.
and reviewing all of that stuff. Those are just like, I mean, it's like pure gold. Like you don't get that, right? Because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think for me, that was huge, huge, like wins and just super valuable information. And then being able to just like, hey, is this normal? Or what do I do about this? Right. I mean, because you don't know. It's
Yep.
so different.
Yeah, and
So
that's what
different.
I always tell people is like it's just a different world. And I get on these calls because people
Yeah.
will be like, I want you to talk to my wife or I want you to talk to my parents or whatever it is. And I'm like, hey, it's great, but like unless they understand the average rep's going to come make over almost 200 grand and like work with the smartest people and the interview process is 5 to 7 interviews that could take 6 to 12 weeks or longer, like I can't talk
Yeah.
with them because they're not going to understand because when I'm sitting here saying 200 grand, those people will look at me with big eyes and it takes them 3 years to make that. And so
Yeah.
again, that's never like a flex. It's just you don't know the industry. So it's I can't talk to you about it and you're not going to understand it. And so that's why we always say because we only take 5 people every month, and you were one of the people who just showed it to me. As you guys can see, why we let Jen into the courses as she's a go getter and goes with it. But like I say, you have to be hardworking, you
Yeah.
have to be coachable. Those are the big things, and then the last one, can you be committed? And and
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing with it. But I always ask that question because I love just seeing someone who trusted the process because you've heard me say it inside the course a million times. It's like, guys, please just trust the process. I've done this enough. We've
Yeah.
gotten plenty of you guys hired. If you can just trust the process and put in the work, I promise you, we will get you where you need to go. And seeing you crush it, see where you're at now, see you land with a great company with the industry that you're going into, and just know that
Yeah.
this is just the beginning and you're going to do so great. It's just been a lot of fun to watch your journey and just want to tell you how proud I am of you and see all of the
Yeah.
hard work go well.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, like I said, you have just been instrumental. And I mean, even just like the podcasts that you make that are, the quick, maybe 15 or 20-minute, just like encouragement. And because it is so up and down, that it can feel really, really defeating sometimes. And especially if you don't have multiple interviews going at the same time and you don't get one, I mean, it's a bummer, right? You put in a lot of work for I mean, 2 months, 3 months, and don't get the offer. So
Yeah.
I'm so incredibly like grateful to you and the program.
Well, thank you. It's been fun to watch you and just be a part of your journey. And I know this isn't the last time of it. It's going to continue to stay. Just real quick, where can these guys find you and reach out to you at?
Yeah. So I'm like 32 years old and don't have a Facebook. So I'm not on Facebook. You won't find me there, but
Perfect.
LinkedIn's great.
Yeah.
Jen Lytle on LinkedIn. Like I said, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for 10 years now. So you'll see all that background and just took a position with Smith and Nephew. So
Yes.
that'll
Uh,
be me.
I love it. And guys, feel free to reach out. But this is the one thing, as you all know, I will say this. This is not a place for free information to call Jen and be like, "Hey Jen, I have 17 questions." I literally I had a guy call me today and he's like, "I don't know how much free time you have, but I have 100 questions." I'm like, "Dude, I have no free time.
No free time.
I like ask me your questions, please. Like you're supposed to come prepared." But like I just say that don't reach out to it. Don't be a creep. Don't do this weird stuff, but also respect people's times. So if you do that, and I always tell my guests, please, if they're not, don't respond to them or tell them to kick rocks. And you can put my name and sign that because again, it's just respecting other people at this point. And so we just appreciate you guys. And Jen, again, just so proud of you and congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jacob. And I'm willing to talk to anybody who wants to reach out. So just shoot me a message on LinkedIn.
Love it. And if you guys haven't pressed that like and subscribe button, a 5-star review helps us grow this channel. And if you guys are interested on learning more about how we help people like Jen break into the industry in under 12 weeks, she did it in 11, but our average is 9.8 weeks at $91,000. Feel free to reach out to me. We can get us on all social medias, LinkedIn, New to Medical Device Sales, Jacob McLaughlin, and happy to connect with you and help you break into the industry. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.